Honestly, Amelia, you need to understand that you will never understand business. It takes presence, handshakes, and grit, not algorithms and soft science degrees. My father, Arthur Vance, delivered the hook with a loud, dismissive laugh that echoed in the cavernous, mahogany-paneled dining room. He didn't look at me. He addressed my brother, Robert, confirming the accepted family truth. The sheer certainty in his voice, the belief that my mind was fundamentally incapable of grasping commerce, was a familiar and enduring pain. My name is Amelia Vance. I am 34 years old, and for the last 8 years, I have been the family's resident source of intellectual dismissal. My father's firm, Vance Industrial Composites, dominated the regional market for specialized building materials, relying on decades-old manufacturing processes and entrenched personal loyalties. He measured worth in factory floor space and the weight of finished products. My own career was, to them, an absurd joke. I founded and ran Aether Materials, a company specializing in advanced, sustainable polymer composites created through large-scale digital manufacturing and 3D printing. My firm was lean, remote, and highly focused on R&D, the very antithesis of Vance Industrial. The context and character intro was simple. Arthur Vance, 65, patriarch, believed that I, his daughter, lacked the fundamental hardness required for competition. My brother Robert, 38, the designated heir and VP of operations, happily reinforced this belief, ensuring I remained excluded from the inner circle. The core background conflict was rooted in the day I walked out of Vance Industrial. I had presented a 10-year plan detailing the necessity of digital integration and sustainable sourcing. Arthur had laughed me out of his office, calling my ideas unmanly and academic fluff. "You're smart, Amelia, but you're too sensitive for the marketplace," he'd said, sealing my exile. For years, they enjoyed their smug certainty while I suffered silently, building my empire in the shadows. They assumed I was merely consulting for a small nonprofit. They had no idea Aether Materials was now poised to disrupt the entire composites sector. The current event trigger was the annual Industry Leadership Gala, a black-tie affair held tonight at the city's oldest hotel. It was mandatory attendance for every player in the local construction and materials sector. Arthur desperately needed this night to land the Legacy Tower contract, a massive municipal project that promised decades of stable revenue and would cement Vance Industrial's dominance against newer, more efficient competitors. Arthur was tense, his usual booming confidence strained by financial anxiety. The humiliation scene began immediately after the main course. Arthur gathered a circle of industry leaders, subtly positioning himself to boast about his stability. He inevitably turned the conversation toward me, the shadow daughter. "Amelia here still handles her digital arts," Arthur boomed, offering a strained, artificial smile. "We let her come tonight to see how real business operates. She always had the theory, but bless her heart, she never developed the necessary instinct for risk or the capacity for hard negotiation." Robert, slick in a bespoke suit, leaned in. "She's a wonderful resource for theoretical modeling, Mr. Davison. But when it comes to delivering 1,000 tons of structural I-beams on a tight deadline, you need someone who knows the factory floor, not just the firewall. You need grit, not GitHub." The industrial leaders, men who spoke the language of concrete and tonnage, chuckles politely, affirming my status as the irrelevant amateur. Arthur raised his glass, clinking it against Mr. Davison's, the final condescending toast to my failure. "To the Legacy Tower contract," Arthur stated, his voice heavy with need. "The contract that will define the future of this industry." I smiled, a slow, quiet, devastating smile that felt cold on my lips. "I certainly hope so, Father, because I agree. The Legacy Tower contract will absolutely define the future of this industry." I stepped forward, subtly positioning myself directly in front of the center table, commanding the attention of the entire circle. "You're right, Arthur. It takes risk and hard negotiation to land a contract of that scale. But it also takes superior product and digital efficiency, both of which Vance Industrial regrettably lacks." Arthur frowned, annoyance replacing his false pride. "Amelia, what are you doing?" "This is a business conversation." "It is, Father," I confirmed. "And I have an update on that Legacy Tower contract. An update I believe you will find highly relevant." The proof of worth, revelation began with a single precise technical term. The Legacy Tower contract requires 60,000 square meters of high-stress, Custom-molded polymer composite cladding for the exterior and core structure, I stated, my voice clear and authoritative, reciting the exact specification Arthur had been fighting over for 6 months. Arthur, you attempted to bid using your outdated thermoset processes. That method resulted in a 4% margin of error on the structural load tests and a 14-week delivery timeline. Arthur's face paled. He recognized the numbers instantly, the very weaknesses his engineers had struggled to conceal. How do you know those specific failure rates? I know them because my firm, Aether Materials, submitted the winning bid, I announced, letting the sheer weight of the statement crush the atmosphere. We guaranteed a 0.1% margin of error and a 7-week delivery timeline using our patented digital flux 3D printing process. The city signed the final contract this afternoon. The entire circle of powerful men dissolved into stunned silence and disbelief. Robert spluttered, dropping his napkin. Arthur stared at me, his eyes wide with a combination of terror and corporate betrayal. Aether Materials, Arthur whispered, the name of the upstart competitor he had dismissed as a niche novelty finally hitting him as an existential threat. You are Aether Materials? You're the CEO of the company that just stole the legacy contract? I am the CEO, founder, and chief engineer of Aether Materials. Father, I confirmed, pulling a slim, elegant business card from my clutch and placing it precisely on the white linen next to Arthur's untouched bread plate. I didn't just steal the contract. I demonstrated that Vance Industrial's antiquated methods are fundamentally incapable of competing with the digital future I represent. The turning of tables was complete. I looked directly at Robert, who was trying desperately to calculate the catastrophic loss of revenue this represented. You mocked my GitHub, Robert, I said, my voice quiet. That GitHub just bought the next decade of this industry's profits. Your capacity for hard negotiation is now irrelevant against a 7-week delivery timeline. I looked back at my father, who was leaning heavily on the table. You told me I would never understand business, Arthur. I understood it well enough to eliminate your primary source of revenue and secure the single most important contract of your generation. I am not just your competitor. I am the new industry leader. The aftermath was a cold, prolonged corporate execution rather than a dramatic fight. Arthur and Robert attempted to rally, but the loss of the Legacy Tower contract was a publicly known fact the next morning, confirming that Vance Industrial was hemorrhaging both revenue and competence. My phone rang incessantly with desperate pleas, but I delegated all family communication to my chief legal counsel, ensuring I maintained an absolute professional firewall. The long-term consequences were meted out with surgical precision, ensuring their demise was slow, agonizing, and entirely visible to the industry they cherished. The financial siege, strangulation of the supply chain. Vance Industrial relied heavily on high-volume, continuous sourcing of specialized resins and compounds, the same raw materials Aether Materials used. My first major move as the new industry giant was to enter into exclusive, long-term purchasing agreements with their 2 most critical chemical suppliers, effectively locking Arthur out of the market for the necessary quality and volume of materials. Arthur, unable to compete with Aether's pricing or volume, was forced to purchase his raw materials from tertiary markets at exorbitant markups. His profit margins evaporated. The very foundation of his tangible business was choked by my invisible digital contracts. The professional ruin. Robert attempted to fight back, leveraging his old-school connections and personal loyalties. He launched a public smear campaign, labeling Aether Materials as untested and unreliable digital upstarts. The result was disastrous. The construction industry, facing intense regulatory pressure for efficiency and sustainability, dismissed Robert's attacks as the desperate whining of the obsolete. Robert, unable to secure new contracts and watching his existing client base defect to Aether Materials, became a fixture at trade shows, not as a respected executive, but as a man visibly consumed by failure and professional envy. The ultimate acquisition, the final judgment. The decline of Vance Industrial was swift. Within 3 years, the company was debt-ridden, its factory floors operating at 20% capacity, its assets deeply distressed. Arthur, broken by the loss of his life's work, requested one final meeting with me, not as the CEO, but as the daughter. I agreed to meet him at his lawyer's office, ensuring the environment remained strictly professional. He looked years older, his tailored suit hanging loose on his frame. "Amelia," he began, his voice hoarse, "it's over. We have no cash flow, no contracts, and the bank is calling the loan. I'm filing for Chapter 11 liquidation next week. I just wanted you to know that you were right. About the technology, about the future." He paused, summoning the last shred of his former pride. "I came here for one thing. The name. Vance Industrial Composites is my legacy. I want to save the name from liquidation. I want to ensure my grandsons can still see the name on a building someday." I listened patiently, already knowing the figures. I had waited for this moment not for the cruelty of his total defeat, but for the clarity of his ultimate need. "Arthur," I said, placing a single, meticulously prepared contract on the desk, "I'm not going to let you file for Chapter 11. I'm going to save your legacy, but only on my terms. Aether Materials will not simply watch you liquidate. We are purchasing the assets of Vance Industrial Composites for the precise value of its outstanding debt." Arthur stared at the contract. "You're buying the wreckage? Why?" "To strip the unnecessary overhead and integrate your remaining manufacturing capacity into Aether Materials' own network," I explained. "We need your physical footprint, but we don't need your management. And yes, I will pay your debt, but your pride will be the collateral." He swallowed hard. "And the name? You'll discard the Vance name?" "I will," I confirmed. "But I will create a wholly owned Aether subsidiary, the Vance Foundation for Advanced Material Research. It will carry the Vance name and will fund the R&D that you always denied, the sustainability and digital integration programs. It will be the successful, forward-thinking legacy you always wanted, but failed to create." Arthur signed the asset purchase agreement, his hand steady this time, a final, absolute capitulation to the superior business strategy of his daughter. The moral closure was achieved not just by defeating him, but by financially dismantling his firm and then using the assets to fund the exact opposite of what he believed in, all while preserving the family name under my financial control. My final conversation with Arthur Vance took place 1 year later, at the dedication ceremony for the Vance Foundation for Advanced Material Research. Arthur and Eleanor, now living quietly in a modest retirement home, were granted seats in the back row. Arthur approached me, his eyes wet with a mixture of pride and devastating regret. "The foundation is doing incredible work, Amelia. The press coverage, you've restored the name." "I restored the potential, Arthur," I corrected, looking at the sleek foundation logo that pulsed with digital light. "You taught me that business requires grit and risk. You were right, but you failed to recognize that true leverage is not in the physical product, but in the intelligent process. You focused on the factory floor. I focused on the future." "I was wrong," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "I spent 20 years telling my daughter she didn't understand business, but all that time, you were quietly building the model that would inevitably destroy mine. I was a fool." "No, Dad," I concluded, looking past him to the immense digital screens displaying the Foundation's global research network. "You were never a fool. You were just too ordinary to recognize the extraordinary potential right in front of you, and I purchased your defeat to fund my own victory." I turned, leaving him standing there, a retired man, financially secure, but permanently stripped of the self-belief that had defined his life. I had not only become his biggest competitor, I had become the indispensable architect of his family's survival and the unquestioned leader of the industry he once ruled.